Well, this is a really interesting point. So Sarah Ferguson has closed down 6 businesses, a lot of them owe money.
A revelation has emerged from behind palace walls, sending a tremor through royal corridors. A confidential financial arrangement in Qatar, allegedly tied to Sarah Ferguson, has quietly surfaced, and within senior circles one word echoes: betrayal.
Sarah, because she appears to be implicated in these Epstein files, she's not in the royal bubble anymore. She doesn't live with a royal. She's lost her Duchess of York title.
Courtiers stand stunned. Advisors scramble in hushed rooms as unanswered questions gather weight. Was this a last attempt to steady a collapsing enterprise? Lingering fallout from renewed scrutiny over Jeffrey Epstein? Or something more calculated? Whatever the truth, this agreement was never meant for daylight. A deal beyond the desert silence. On September 16, 2025, Sarah Ferguson made what would become her last confirmed public appearance at the memorial service of Catherine, Duchess of Kent. The occasion was solemn, steeped in tradition and quiet remembrance. Cameras captured her arrival. Observers noted nothing unusual. Yet in hindsight, that composed public moment now feels like the closing scene of a chapter no one realized was ending. After that day, she seemed to disappear. There were no further engagements added to the calendar. No interviews surfaced. No public remarks clarified her absence. The silence was not gradual. It was immediate and absolute. In royal circles, absence is rarely accidental. At first, many assumed she had stepped back to escape mounting pressure. Financial questions had been growing louder. Commentary around her commercial ventures had sharpened. A pause, under those circumstances, felt understandable. But what has since emerged suggests something more deliberate may have been unfolding out of sight. Sources familiar with her movements indicate that shortly after that September appearance, she traveled to the Gulf region, reportedly spending time in the United Arab Emirates. Travel abroad in isolation would not have raised alarm. International connections are common among public figures. What transforms this development into something far more consequential are reports of parallel discussions taking place in Qatar. According to emerging accounts, negotiations centered on a private financial and residency arrangement. The goal, insiders suggest, was stability at a time when her commercial foundations were beginning to show visible strain. Investment backing was reportedly part of the proposal, capital designed to steady ventures facing pressure. Even more significant were the alleged confidentiality protections embedded within the framework. Strict media controls, if true, would provide not only financial breathing room, but also insulation from public scrutiny. The implications stretch far beyond geography. This is not simply about relocating from one region to another, it is about leverage and perception. Ferguson spent decades inside royal life. She attended high-level events, navigated personal and institutional tensions, and observed firsthand the delicate balance that sustains the monarchy. When someone with that depth of experience enters into a structured relationship with influential interests outside the United Kingdom, concern is almost inevitable. Palace aides, according to insiders, are unsettled. The anxiety does not stem from confirmed wrongdoing. It is rooted in optics and influence. When a former senior royal with intimate knowledge of internal dynamics seeks security abroad, questions follow quickly. Who benefits from proximity? Who gains access? And what expectations might accompany financial support offered during vulnerability? Timing deepens the gravity. Her disappearance in September 2025 coincided with intensifying scrutiny and mounting financial strain. Business operations were reportedly under quiet review. Public commentary was growing sharper. In that climate, relocating to the Gulf could appear less like retreat and more like strategy. Royal commentators have long described parts of the Middle East as environments where British reputational controversies carry less immediate weight. Within that context, Qatar's reported role becomes especially significant. Such an arrangement would not simply provide temporary refuge, it could create distance from domestic financial systems and relentless media cycles. Still, nothing has been publicly confirmed. No formal statement acknowledges a finalized agreement. Yet the sequence, memorial appearance, sudden silence, Gulf presence, alleged negotiations, forms a pattern difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Inside royal corridors, the tone has shifted from curiosity to calculation. The narrative of quiet withdrawal is fading. In its place stands something sharper, more structured, and carefully shielded. And for those watching closely, one conclusion grows harder to ignore. This was not merely a relocation. It was positioning. Inside the royal corridors, subtle movements suggest strategy over chance. Was this quiet withdrawal truly relocation, or a calculated maneuver reshaping influence and power? And if so, who stands to gain in a game that few dare to see clearly? Let's find out. The collapse that changed the equation. If the reported negotiations in Qatar signaled positioning, the events that followed explain the urgency behind them. By February 2026, the financial structure surrounding Sarah Ferguson began to fall apart with startling speed. What had once appeared to be a diverse portfolio of ventures suddenly unraveled in a matter of days. On February 13, 2026, Phoenix Events Limited formally entered dissolution. That alone might not have raised the alarm. Businesses close all the time. But 3 days later, on February 16th, 5 additional companies followed in rapid succession. Philanthropian Limited, Fergus Farm Limited, Luna Investments Limited, Solomoni Limited, and Planet Partners Productions Limited were all shut down within the same 72-hour window. 6 enterprises erased from the corporate register almost simultaneously. The pattern was impossible to ignore. For years, these companies formed part of a broader effort to maintain commercial independence after her 1996 divorce. They represented media projects, event management, brand collaborations, and investment vehicles. Their disappearance suggested more than routine restructuring. It looked like a contraction under pressure. Then came another blow. Sarah's Trust, the charitable foundation she established in 2020 to support disadvantaged women and children across 20 countries and in partnership with more than 60 organizations, announced the indefinite suspension of its operations. For a charity that had promoted educational initiatives, medical outreach, and emergency support, the pause was not symbolic. It was seismic. Supporters were left uncertain. Beneficiaries were left waiting. The silence surrounding the decision only deepened speculation. The timing makes the financial strain even more striking. Just weeks earlier, on January 30, 2026, the United States Department of Justice released additional documents connected to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. While inclusion in those files carries no legal assumption of criminal wrongdoing, the renewed public scrutiny was immediate and intense. Media outlets revisited old headlines. Commentators reopened past questions. The narrative she had long attempted to move beyond was suddenly back in circulation. Pressure was building from multiple directions at once. Commercial structures were dissolving. A charitable arm was forced into suspension. Reputational concerns were reignited on an international stage. Against that backdrop, the alleged discussions in Qatar no longer appear abstract or speculative. They align with a moment of acute vulnerability. Financial security can reshape decisions. When revenue streams shrink and liabilities grow, stability becomes urgent rather than optional. In that light, a confidential investment or residency arrangement in the Gulf region could be interpreted as a lifeline. Not an indulgence, not a luxury, but a safeguard. A means of stepping outside the tightening financial and media climate in the United Kingdom. Yet the scale and speed of the corporate closures raise a deeper question. Was the move toward Qatar purely defensive, a necessary response to mounting instability, or was it something more strategic? Was it an escape from collapse, or a calculated shift designed to rebalance power at a critical moment? The wave of corporate closures was swift and unprecedented, but was the move toward Qatar merely defensive, or a calculated pivot? Did it conceal fear of collapse, or reveal a strategic gamble shaping the balance of power at a pivotal moment? Let's uncover the hidden truth, the past that refused to stay buried. As the financial structure around Sarah Ferguson weakened in early 2026, another force quietly intensified the pressure. It was not new, it was not unexpected, but it returned with renewed force, reopening wounds that had never fully healed. On January 30th, 2026, the United States Department of Justice released additional documents connected to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Within hours, familiar headlines resurfaced. Old associations were examined again, this time under a sharper lens. Although being named in such documents carries no legal presumption of criminal involvement, the court of public opinion does not operate by legal standards alone. It reacts to memory, timing, and optics. The timeline at the center of renewed scrutiny stretches back more than a decade. In 2009, just 5 days after Jeffrey Epstein was released from serving 13 months of an 18-month sentence in Florida for procuring underage prostitutes, Ferguson traveled to meet him at his residence in Miami. That visit would later become one of the most questioned decisions of her public life. Correspondence from 2009 through 2011 further complicated the narrative. Messages reportedly exchanged during that period reflected a tone that shifted over time. In August 2009, months after the Miami visit, she allegedly described him in unusually warm terms. By January 2010, the language appeared even more effusive. Then, in September 2011, she publicly declared that she would have no further contact with Epstein under any circumstances. Yet documents suggest that later in 2011, communication may have resumed despite that vow. Reports indicated she expressed disappointment that he had not remained in touch. That contradiction between public statements and private exchanges became a focal point once the new material entered circulation in 2026. The resurfacing of these details reignited debate, regardless of the absence of formal charges. Charitable organizations responded swiftly when similar information first became widely discussed years earlier. The Teenage Cancer Trust withdrew her patronage. Julius House Children's Hospice publicly stated that her continued involvement would be inappropriate. Those decisions marked a significant reputational turning point at the time, and the reemergence of related documentation risked reopening that chapter entirely. Her representatives have previously maintained that certain correspondence occurred after legal counsel, suggesting context matters. Still, public memory tends to simplify complex timelines. When corporate closures and charitable suspensions align with renewed controversy, perception can overshadow nuance. In Britain, rehabilitation within elite circles often depends on distance from scandal and disciplined silence. The problem in early 2026 was that silence no longer shielded her. The past had re-entered the present, amplified by official documentation and rapid digital circulation. Financial instability made the situation more fragile. Each dissolved company, each paused initiative, added weight to the narrative of decline. If stability within the United Kingdom was narrowing, options beyond it naturally grew more significant. Analysts had long argued that in parts of the Middle East, historic controversies tied to British tabloids carry far less social consequence. In that context, the reported Gulf negotiations take on a different tone. They are no longer merely financial maneuvers. They appear as calculated moves within a shrinking domestic landscape. When reputational repair at home becomes increasingly difficult, the search for footing elsewhere can feel less like escape and more like necessity. As domestic stability in the United Kingdom falters, Gulf negotiations gain new weight. But are these moves calculated strategy, opportunistic survival, or a sign that influence finds its true footing only where scrutiny fades? Keep watching, where influence finds new ground. If Britain was becoming an increasingly narrow space for recovery, attention naturally shifted outward. Commentators who have followed the trajectory of Sarah Ferguson for decades began pointing to a region that has often offered a different kind of reception. Royal biographer Andrew Loney has previously argued that social rehabilitation within the United Kingdom remains deeply difficult for both Ferguson and Prince Andrew. In his assessment, public memory in Britain is long and unforgiving. Across parts of the Middle East, however, historic British controversies do not carry the same cultural weight. That distinction matters. Royal analyst Samara Gill has also suggested that the Gulf region represents not merely refuge, but opportunity. Wealth networks, private investment circles, and influential figures operate within systems that are less dependent on British media cycles. In such an environment, reputational damage reported in London does not automatically translate into social exile. It can, instead, become background noise. This broader context reframes the reported discussions in Qatar. Rather than appearing as an impulsive move made under stress, they begin to look structured and strategic. Allegations surrounding the arrangement suggest that it may not have been limited to residency or financial backing alone. Some observers believe advisory roles, media access rights, or even structured documentary involvement could have formed part of the conversation. Exclusive access to a figure with decades of proximity to the monarchy holds undeniable value. Stories untold, perspectives unseen, private corridors remembered in detail. In an era where narrative equals currency, such access carries weight. It is important to note that no official confirmation has outlined the terms of any agreement. Yet speculation continues to grow because the elements align too closely with the moment. Financial contraction. Renewed scrutiny from documents released on January 30, 2026. Corporate dissolutions in February 2026. Charitable suspension. Then reported positioning within the Gulf. The sequence feels deliberate. Another layer complicates the picture. Reports in late 2025 indicated that advisors had privately considered the possibility of an unrestricted television interview as a way to stabilize finances. That interview never materialized. If alternative backing emerged in Qatar, it could represent more than income. It could serve as protection, a preemptive shield against external media pressure. A means of ensuring that if a story were ever told, it would be on negotiated terms rather than under financial desperation. Within palace circles, such developments are not viewed lightly. When a former senior royal with long institutional memory establishes strong external alliances, questions of influence naturally follow. The concern is less about confirmed actions and more about potential leverage. The monarchy depends heavily on discretion, on controlled messaging, and on unity of presentation. Any arrangement that shifts narrative control beyond its reach unsettles that balance. Those watching from inside the royal establishment understand the stakes clearly. The anxiety does not center solely on past associations or dissolved companies. It centers on possibility, on the unpredictable power of disclosure, on the value of private knowledge in a world hungry for revelation. Because in the end, the fear may not lie in what she has already done, but in what she could choose to say. Inside the palace, every whisper carries weight. But is the real danger what has already been revealed, or the shadow of secrets she could still choose to expose, reshaping power, perception, and the very order of the royal world? Stay tuned. Tension behind palace doors. As speculation about Gulf alliances intensified, unease reportedly deepened within royal circles. What began as quiet concern over financial instability evolved into something more politically sensitive. According to insiders, the greatest alarm was not about relocation itself, but about the possibility of an independent media move taking shape beyond palace oversight. The monarchy functions on coordination. Public appearances, interviews, statements, and partnerships are traditionally calibrated with care. When a former senior royal appears to negotiate externally without consultation, it disrupts that rhythm. Sources suggest that discussions surrounding a potential interview had already unsettled senior figures in late 2025. American television executives were said to be receptive, with names such as Oprah Winfrey quietly circulating as a possible platform should authorization ever be granted. That prospect alone carried weight. A globally televised conversation, conducted outside palace structure, would inevitably shift narrative control. Within that climate, reported arrangements in Qatar triggered sharper reactions. The word used privately by some insiders was severe. Betrayal, not necessarily because of confirmed disclosures, but because of perceived independence. Entering negotiations abroad without visible coordination can be interpreted as stepping beyond the traditional boundaries that once governed royal proximity. The sensitivities extend to the highest levels. King Charles III now presides over an institution navigating its own modern challenges. Queen Camilla has worked carefully to stabilize her public role after years of scrutiny. Any development that reopens old controversies or introduces new ones complicates that effort. Stability is currency within the monarchy. Unscripted revelations threaten it. Then there is Prince William. Reports indicate he has taken a firm position regarding future interactions.
The scale of the problems and things like that. So we wanted to break it down and try and work out how could we add something that was going to create action, create positivity, create energy towards actually solving some of these problems.
According to sources cited previously, he has made it clear that he does not wish to encounter her presence in royal settings moving forward. That stance underscores how deeply trust has eroded. It also highlights generational tension within the institution, where image management and strategic caution are paramount. Beyond personal dynamics lies a broader concern about optics. When a figure long associated with the royal family forms financial or media relationships in another sovereign state, questions naturally arise about influence and perception. The monarchy's identity is closely tied to national symbolism. Any appearance that private royal knowledge could intersect with foreign interests carries delicate implications. Importantly, no public accusation has confirmed wrongdoing. The anxiety appears rooted in possibility rather than proof. Yet possibility alone can shape strategy. Palace officials understand that in a media environment driven by exclusives and access, proximity to insider memory has tangible value. The mere suggestion that such access could be monetized or strategically deployed shifts the balance of control. In this unfolding situation, the tension is not loud, but it is unmistakable. Conversations are measured, reactions are restrained, but beneath the surface, concern lingers about who ultimately commands the narrative when financial necessity, personal history, and international alliances converge at once. Beneath measured conversations and restrained reactions, an invisible tension grows. But when personal history, financial necessity, and international alliances collide, who truly controls the unfolding story? And can anyone navigate the reckoning that now silently looms over all? Let's unravel the details. A moment of reckoning. Behind the diplomatic tension and whispered concern lies a simpler, more human reality. Survival often dictates decisions, even for those long accustomed to privilege. For Sarah Ferguson, the years following her 1996 divorce were defined by a careful, almost daily balancing act. She maintained a presence within royal circles without formal protection, navigating proximity to the institution that once defined her life while simultaneously crafting a sense of independence. She built businesses, launched projects, supported charitable causes, and endured public scrutiny with a persistence few could sustain. Yet, by late 2025 and early 2026, the delicate equilibrium she had maintained for decades began to show signs of strain. One of the most symbolic shifts was the loss of Royal Lodge as a stable residence. The property had long represented continuity, a physical anchor amid the turbulence of divorce and distance from official duties. It was a place that quietly affirmed enduring ties, a reminder that certain privileges and protections remained despite formal separation from the monarchy. Without that anchor, the sense of permanence narrowed. Housing, security, and lifestyle all require steady funding, and funding in turn requires reliable income streams. Prospects for full social rehabilitation within the United Kingdom have been widely described as limited. Past controversies never entirely faded from public memory, and renewed scrutiny following the January 30, 2026 release of additional Epstein-related documents intensified the barrier. Reputation, in Britain's tightly woven networks of influence, quietly dictates opportunity. A tarnished public image can close doors that remain open to others, even decades after the incidents themselves. Financial comparisons within her immediate circle further underscore the challenge. Prince Andrew, having served in the Royal Navy, is reportedly eligible for a government pension estimated at approximately £7,000 annually. While modest by royal standards, it represents guaranteed income and a buffer against instability. Ferguson, by contrast, found herself navigating precarious terrain. By February 2026, 6 of her business ventures had closed within 72 hours. Sarah's trust suspended operations. Revenue streams that had once offered flexibility and independence were evaporating. In November 2025, reports suggested that advisors privately evaluated the possibility of an unrestricted television appearance as a mechanism to generate immediate funds. Such an interview would likely have commanded both significant attention and substantial compensation, with American networks reportedly interested. Yet no such broadcast materialized. Whether due to negotiation complications, personal hesitation, or a strategic reconsideration of long-term consequences, the opportunity remained unrealized as of early 2026. Viewed in this light, the reported discussions in Qatar take on additional significance. If Western media outlets were willing to pay heavily for exclusive access, and if a televised interview was being considered as a financial solution, then alternative backing from Gulf partners could represent far more than refuge. Structured investment, potential residency security, and media partnerships may offer stability extending beyond the uncertain one-off financial boost of a single tell-all broadcast. The possibility of reliable, long-term backing transforms the stakes, suggesting a strategic pivot rather than merely a temporary escape. The financial crossroads, therefore, was concrete and immediate. Fixed expenses continued, public scrutiny intensified, and the collapse of multiple business structures placed tangible pressure on decision-making. Advisory discussions explored bold and unconventional strategies, and international negotiations appear less surprising when seen through this lens. The lingering question, quietly provocative, remains: if major Western media platforms were prepared to pay for unrestricted access, and if the interview never took place, what ultimately shifted the equation? Did new Gulf partnerships merely provide stability, or had they quietly outpaced the capacity and willingness of Western broadcasters to offer comparable security and opportunity? And if major Western media sought unrestricted access, yet the interview never occurred, what unseen forces reshaped the outcome? Did emerging Gulf partnerships merely provide stability, or had they quietly surpassed the influence Western broadcasters were once thought to hold? When silence becomes power. For more than 3 decades, discretion was the quiet contract. When Sarah Ferguson walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey in July 1986, she was not simply marrying into a family.
The Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, has spent more than 4 decades in the public eye. Those times haven't always been easy, but she's now forged her own life away from the royal family.
She was entering an institution shaped by hierarchy, ritual, and an unwritten rule: loyalty expressed through silence. Even after her divorce in 1996, that understanding largely endured. She did not vanish from royal orbit, but she adjusted her distance, close enough to attend key moments, far enough to avoid disruption, present yet peripheral. For 30 years, she managed that fragile line without crossing it. Time, however, shifts both circumstance and leverage. By February 2026, the stability that had once supported long-term restraint appeared to weaken dramatically. Within 72 hours, 6 of her business entities were formally dissolved. The speed alone raised eyebrows. These were not gradual wind-downs. They were abrupt conclusions. Sarah's Trust, established in 2020 with the mission of supporting women and children across 20 countries, announced the indefinite suspension of its activities. A philanthropic platform that once projected optimism and expansion had fallen silent. The financial tremors did not occur in isolation. On January 30th, 2026, the United States Department of Justice released additional documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The renewed public focus reignited scrutiny across a wide spectrum of figures previously linked, directly or indirectly, to that era of controversy. Media attention intensified. Old associations were revisited. Commentary sharpened. In such an atmosphere, reputational management becomes more complex, and long-standing arrangements feel less secure. Residential certainty also appeared to shift. Financial footing looked less predictable. The quiet incentives that once made prolonged discretion beneficial began to erode. Economic pressure has a way of altering perspective. When ventures collapse and charitable arms suspend operations, future security moves from abstract concern to immediate priority. Stability becomes urgent, not optional. It is within that context that reports of a potential arrangement in Qatar take on amplified meaning. If such an agreement included structured financial backing, residency assurances, or even carefully defined media access rights, its importance would extend beyond short-term relief. In today's global media marketplace, authenticity is prized. Proximity to power is valuable. Insight drawn from lived experience inside one of the world's most recognized monarchies carries measurable weight. And that is where the tension sharpens. It is not necessary for confidential details to be revealed for influence to shift. The simple fact that someone possesses decades of first-hand observation, private conversations, institutional habits, unspoken dynamics, can alter negotiations. If any foreign partnership were to include advisory roles, documentary consultation, or negotiated storytelling rights, even in limited form, the implications would ripple outward. Narrative control has always been central to royal continuity. Once that control exists beyond palace influence, even subtly, equilibrium changes. Inside royal circles, according to insiders, one word surfaced repeatedly: betrayal. Yet betrayal depends on perspective. Is it the pursuit of financial independence beyond traditional royal channels? Or is it the perception that institutional narrative might be shaped, interpreted, or contextualized outside established boundaries? The monarchy relies heavily on unity of presentation. External negotiations, particularly within another sovereign state, create optics that are difficult to dismiss. Still, nothing definitive has been publicly confirmed. No exclusive interview has aired. No documentary project has been formally announced. The tension rests in possibility rather than proof. But possibility alone can carry extraordinary weight when it intersects with proximity to power. For 30 years, silence functioned as currency. It preserved relationships. It sustained access. It prevented escalation. Now, as financial realities evolve and international alignments emerge, that currency may be undergoing recalculation. In royal circles, silence has always held value. And at 66, Sarah Ferguson may be redefining exactly how much it is worth. So, what do you think? Was this move driven by survival instincts or calculated strategy? Smart recovery or subtle pressure? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.